It's Will Middleton and Thomas Levy from LifterLMS. Thomas is the CTO and one of the main developers behind LifterLMS and all the wonderful code that ends up on the back end of your WordPress website, making all the magic happen. We're here to go through the 7.0 changelog and just kind of talk through in layman's terms what each of the changes and updates does. So yeah, the new features that were added is handling for admin settings, options that are stored in their option values in a nested array. I have no clue what that means at all. I guess, Thomas, do you have any insight on what?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, actually, let me just start. I mean, LifterLMS is a release that 7.0 is a release that we've been working on for probably a solid 6 months. It's our first major release since 6.0. For those of you who can count. This is like kind of a really performance heavy release. It's a major release because there are a couple of breaking changes in here, which change existing functionality. That doesn't affect almost anybody in the world except developers with highly customized functionality or features. But yeah, so it's a big performance upgrade, and this first thing, handling admin settings that store their options in a nested array, is very much a performance improvement. So when you get LifterLMS installed, there's several dozen, maybe 50 various options and settings on the admin settings screens, and we're migrating towards merging some of those settings together. So rather than having 50 individual records in your database, we have fewer, and nesting some of those. So if we have similar looking settings, we can store them in one option in the database, and it's just more performant. So it's just faster load times overall. And we're talking like microseconds here with each setting, but they add up over time, especially when you get 40 plus plugins that all have 25 of their own settings and things like that. So
nice. And when you say settings, that means like the content protection feature preferences you set and all that kind of stuff in LifterLMS.
Yeah. There's also content protection, or the URL slugs of your My Account page dashboard tabs, even whether or not an integration is enabled or not is a setting. So and really what we're doing here, what we're setting ourselves up for is in the future we'll have each one of our integrations will have a single option in the database rather than their own set of 5 to 10 options. Saving things in that way. That's what we're looking at.
Nice. So that makes sense. So all the WooCommerce settings for that integration would be
just make it one option instead of 5.
Nice. Awesome. Well, the next one here added a new Ajax Checkout and payment source switching endpoints for payment gateways to utilize instead of pre-existing synchronous form submission methods. So Ajax Checkout, I've heard of that. It's like not reloading the page.
Yeah. Anyway, essentially it's API calls. So if you're familiar with WooCommerce, when you hit the checkout button, or actually LifterLMS, you hit the checkout button and there's like a little loading circle, and then the page reloads. This new checkout system will show you the same thing on the front end, but a lot of stuff happens differently on the back end, and then the page reloads. It's very interesting. This is the big change here in LifterLMS 7.0. It is a little bit of a performance improvement, but we are hopefully weeks away from the release of our upgraded PayPal integration, version 3.0. PayPal is a slightly different checkout experience than Stripe, for example. Stripe, it happens on one screen. PayPal, you redirect to PayPal and then you come back and confirm your payment. And this Ajax Checkout creates a whole new methodology in LifterLMS for how we actually process orders and transactions. And we did it in order to make PayPal work better. We'll port this over to Stripe in the future, but essentially it allows things to happen faster and in a different order that they happen currently. And the big major change, which is kind of buried in the code base and it doesn't really warrant anything, is that users aren't created until the initial transaction is approved. So that will happen in PayPal. And that may not mean anything to anyone, but if it does mean something to you, it's going to be a very, very exciting change. It's going to essentially save space in your database for nonsense. Keep nonsense out of your database.
That's related, right, to the like spam, when people get their checkout form hit with a bunch of spam and then they have 10,000 users. This kind of prevents that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we could.
This next one, on purchase completed, retrieve the redirection URL from the input post. So this whole string here, this is basically about that thank you page redirect feature of Lifter, where after checkout you can redirect somebody to a custom page custom URL, WordPress page, whatever you want. And so you previously had that long URL, right? Whenever you would put the redirect rule on there, it would make this really long URL that says like and redirect. And that's no longer necessary, right, with this update? So it's going to still be the same.
Correct. Yeah, it kind of buries it into the code rather than showing it in the URL bar.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the next thing in updates and enhancements, full site editing, the wrappers in the custom header and footer templates have been changed to semantic HTML tags, the header and footer tags that are usually on web pages instead of div tags.
Correct. Yeah. So this is just something we noticed when we were working on full site editing. We've been adding little by little full site editing support into LifterLMS. We've got some real exciting stuff that's going to be coming after WordPress 6.1 is released. But this change is just it's really a very small semantic change. But the main header and footer elements of your website, your header where your navigation would be, your footer, now use semantic tags. We noticed that this is what 2022 and the upcoming 2023 theme do, and we had just used the default div tags. So we changed that. It is a breaking change. It could affect you if you have if you're using a full site editing theme on LifterLMS specific pages. If you have CSS that targets the element instead of the class name, this could break your CSS. So it's a breaking change. So if you did like div dot header in your and then background blue or something, that's no longer going to work because now it's no longer going to be div dot. It's going to be header dot. But a lot of people don't write CSS that way anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, if you notice your background color changed on your header or footer, this might be why. It's an easy fix. Email us. We'll know how to change it.
Cool. Whenever an order post is restored from the trash, its post status will be LMS pending in favor of draft. So that's when
the order post type doesn't support a draft status, but WordPress added. I think it was in WordPress 6.0. It might have been in 5.9 and we just missed it. That when something is restored for the trash, there's now a new filter that lets you control the status when something is restored from the trash. So previously, you delete an order, it would go to the trash, and then if you untrashed it, it would come back as a draft. Now, when you untrash it, it'll come back as pending.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we don't need to go through like all the bug fixes or depreciations, but is there anything else from like the developer notes or anything else that you want to make sure we highlight to the community about the 7.0 update?
Yeah, I mean, the bug fixes are all bug fixes. Sorry, there are bugs, we fixed them. Deprecations are good to be aware of if you're a developer. Most of these things are probably some internal functions that you weren't using anyway, but since they are technically public, as far as what PHP considers public, we're letting you know about them. Deprecations aren't removed yet. You'll start to see warnings if you have debug logging enabled. If you have debug error display enabled, it's going to mess your website up. You should turn that off. And all of them will come with a notice that tells you what the replacement is if there was one. I think all of these have a replacement. And they haven't been removed yet, so your site isn't actually going to crash. It'll just let you know that you shouldn't use this anymore. It'll be removed in the next major release. The developer notes, a lot of this is really performance heavy, but there are a couple. There is one kind of really cool thing that we added that there with regards to our gateways, our payment gateways, Stripe, PayPal, Authorize.net, etc. We have this secure string stuff here. So we're automatically now redacting strings that should be considered secure API credentials, really, so that those API keys never show up in your logs. I think this was only happening with Authorize.net, where an Authorize.net public key would be logged by accident. The public keys are public, so there's not actually really a security breach there. It's just kind of best practices that we don't want to put those in the logs. Logs are private anyway. Your users aren't going to find them, so it's not really. We're not calling this a security issue, but it is kind of a cool new thing. And there's an internal API for that too. So if any developers are creating integrations of any kind and they have their own set of secure API keys that they want to use, we now have like a secure API or a way to declare what strings would be considered secure. Programmatically. That way, if those show up in logs, they're automatically redacted. And by redacted, I mean we just replace that string with XXXXXX or something like that. I think that was like, and the other kind of cool thing is that we do have this spinning library for displaying loading states. It's under the LLMS.spinner module if you load up or variable namespace in JavaScript. That's been replaced with a JavaScript, like a true JavaScript module or an ESNext module that is much more robust. And we are working to remove jQuery from LifterLMS. So this is the kind of key motivation for this was to not rely on jQuery. We have a goal of the LifterLMS core plugin and all of our add-ons not relying on jQuery at all. That doesn't mean you could drop it from your site because WordPress and a lot of other plugins are still going to rely on it, but we're trying to get out of that for performance reasons and because modern JavaScript is really, really good and we don't really need jQuery anymore. So this is kind of a step towards that that I'm personally excited about. And if you're a developer, you should be excited about it too. And the new module is a little bit, it's got a smaller footprint, so it's a little faster. It's only loaded when it's needed now, whereas previously it was loaded everywhere. So that's a little bit more performant, and it doesn't require jQuery, but it still will accept jQuery. So if you're still using jQuery for it, there's no it's a backwards compatible change. And we actually didn't deprecate the jQuery usage either, so you can still use it that indefinitely. Anyway, that's kind of, I'm kind of excited about it. So it's one of those things that like the average user is like, what are you talking about, Tom? But I'm excited about it. So pretty cool. Yep.
That's great. Well, thanks for joining me. LifterLMS 7.0, a major update regarding performance mainly. And yeah, that's everything I have. Thanks, Thomas, for joining me. And we'll see you in the next Lifter changelog video.
All right. Read the changelog.